Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Deku and Death. This will be part 52, chapter 52, entitled Ghost with a Body. Midoriya sat patiently on the cot in the UA nurse's office, Gami close by his side, and Aizawa leaning lazily against the wall, scrolling through his phone. They'd arrived far before the start of classes as usual, and Aizawa had offered a trip down to Recovery Girl's office to heal away the remnants of the mark around his neck. Looking to avoid any unwanted attention, Midoriya hastily accepted. Aizawa had also offered a day home if he needed it after what happened at the mall just the day before. Yamada was quick to jump on the same bandwagon, insisting that they would completely understand if he needed some time to recover, and Midoriya didn't doubt them. His jaded walls could no longer deny the safety Aizawa swaddled him in, or the compassion Yamada coated him with. Once he and Aizawa came home from the police station, Yamada had clutched both of them into a tight hug, and the three of them together felt like the most complete thing Midoriya had ever been a part of. So he had no doubts that if he had said that he wasn't ready to go back to school today, that either of them would deny him. But it was for that very same reason he didn't want to stay home alone, brewing in his own thoughts. Sitting on the waxy cot, with Gami and Aizawa within arm's reach, he felt more at peace than he would alone. And in peace, Midoriya found a strength that he certainly wouldn't have found in the depths of his rampant thoughts. He was chronically paranoid, and it had taken him 15 years to figure out that perhaps being alone with his paranoia wouldn't help him. The door to the office creaked open, scattering whatever was left of his train of thought. Aizawa looked up from his phone, quickly pocketing it away. "Thank you again, Recovery Girl. I appreciate you making some time for us." "Oh, none of that. You know I get here early like the rest of you all." She waved Aizawa off, resting on her cane as she closed the door behind her. "Now, let me take a look, dearie." Midoriya nodded silently, loosening his tie carefully before pulling it off his neck. He undid the first few buttons of his uniform, widening his collar to expose his throat. If there had been any doubt about what had choked him before, now there was no mistaking the clearly outlined handprint etched into his skin. The bruise had darkened since the attack, sporting the violet darkness of a shadow. The skin around the immediate area glowed a hot red, almost pulsating angrily. Mixed together, his throat was painted a murky indigo, clashing against the usual paleness of his skin, and easily overshadowing the little coverage his uniform provided. The nurse furrowed her brows at the sight. "Goodness, did he get any first aid yesterday?" "We had it wrapped at the station," Aizawa supplied. "And we tried to keep the swelling down with an ice pack last night." Recovery Girl sighed. "Well, I suppose there wasn't much else you could have done. My quirk should heal the rest of it away." She rolled one of her chairs over to the side of the cot, standing atop of it so she could be the same height as Midoriya. Instinctively, the boy leaned his head down, allowing Recovery Girl to place a gentle kiss on his forehead. For the first time, he barely felt a difference as she sapped his stamina away, lacking most of the exhaustion or the discomfort of his heart momentarily giving out when she healed him beyond death. Perhaps that was the difference of avoiding life-ending injuries for once, not that it was really his choice to begin with. Recovery Girl pulled away, and Midoriya put a hesitant hand at his throat, running his fingers tentatively over the skin. When he didn't wince away like he expected, he rested the hand down further. He couldn't feel anything, not the rawness of agitated skin, nor the heat of his bubbling blood, nor the tautness of tense swelling. All that greeted him was the momentary jolt of his own psyche, reminding him that he still wasn't quite ready for pressure at that spot. He swallowed. That didn't even hurt like it used to. Wow, thank you. That feels so much better. Looks better, too. She smiled, patting him on the head. Can't even tell it was there to begin with. Recovery Girl turned to Aizawa, who moved to stand up straight from the wall. Are you two heading up now? Might as well. Aizawa shrugged. Take the rest of the morning to settle in. Midoriya hopped off the cot gently, fixing his buttons until his uniform looked the way it was supposed to. Gami reached for the unraveled tie, threading it between his fingers in a comfortable grip before looping it around Midoriya's neck effortlessly. If either Aizawa or Recovery Girl noticed, they certainly didn't comment. He waited for Gami to finish, bony fingers smoothing out his collar before entering a deep bow. Thank you again. The nurse chuckled lightly. There's really no need. I'm just glad you're all right. Still, Aizawa thanked her again on their way out and back to the classroom. They walked down the halls in a peaceful silence, void of the bustling that usually came with the start of the day. But upon approaching the large signature door of 1A, Aizawa paused a few steps behind him. You can wait inside if you'd like, Midoriya. The teacher then gestured down the hall. I'm going to talk with Nezu before class officially starts. Midoriya nodded. Okay. His brows furrowed for a moment. Words caught just behind his lips. How is he doing? Aizawa had filled him in on what was going on with Nezu after his practical exam. And needless to say, Midoriya had wanted nothing more than to rush to him and apologize until he ran out of breath in his lungs. But Aizawa had insisted that Nezu had needed some time alone then, and despite his everlasting guilt, Midoriya obliged. But that had been days ago, and despite how much better Aizawa knew the principal than him, he couldn't deny that the guilt festering in him left him very antsy. The underground hero gave a soft smile, catching the quiver in Midoriya's voice. He's getting there. If there's anything consistent about Nezu, it's how seriously he takes things, despite the front he likes to put on. That didn't seem to satisfy Midoriya, not that Aizawa really expected it to. He placed his hand on the boy's shoulder in solace, giving a gentle pat. I know you want to talk to him, but he needs a little more time. Trust me, though. Once he's ready, I'll let you know. That seemed to ease Midoriya slightly more than before. Okay. Aizawa gave one final pat before turning around and leaving Midoriya by the door as he trudged down the hall once more. The boy stood awkwardly for a moment, unsure of what to do with himself other than fiddle with his hands and watch Aizawa disappear around the corner. Finally, he willed himself to open the dauntingly massive door, closing it behind him as he stared out at an empty sea of desks. Is everything all right? Gami asked hesitantly. The words shook him out of his thoughts, his vision coming back into focus. Yeah. Just a lot on my mind, I guess. Midoriya laughed to himself. When isn't there? He walked up to the large windows overlooking the edge of the school grounds. Gami trailed behind him, glancing over his successor's shoulder. It was still far too early for anyone to be arriving, and yet Midoriya stared like his attention was so carefully held by the tiny world below him, in the fluttering trees and perched birds and distant peacefulness. Sometimes I wonder, where would I be if I didn't come here? Confused, and quite frankly a bit startled, Gami floated around to get a better look at Midoriya's face. What do you mean? Didn't you want to come here? Are you not happy? This was everything I ever wanted, and I am really happy here, he clarified, placing a hand on the window. I'm happy, I'm grateful, and I'm comfortable, but I'm also nervous and worried, and I'd be lying if I said I was only a little scared. He chuckled quietly. And sometimes, I wonder if there was another place where I wouldn't feel those things, and if it would make me just as happy as I am now. Gami pondered his words for a moment. Do you regret your choice, wanting to become a hero? Midoriya shook his head. Not at all. I know I want to be here, that this is what I want to do. He looked down at his hands, his skin obscured by the thick padding of his gloves. I guess I just wonder if another me who chose something different would regret losing this. The space trickled back into silence as the two continued looking out the window, searching for what could have been. I think it's normal to feel those things. Wondering about what could have been is part of what defines humanity. It's what drives people not to settle, to pursue something greater than the present. I think that's a normal feeling. Gami stared through the glass absently, until his vision moved away from the fluttering trees and perched birds and distant peacefulness, and instead settled on his faint reflection next to his successors. But, I think, if you spend all that time thinking, and you find yourself always coming back to the present, I would say that right now is where you want to be. Midoriya blinked, and suddenly, their shared glossy reflection was all he could see, over the fluttering trees and perched birds and whatever was in the distance. I never thought about it like that. He turned away from the window, at Gami instead. Thanks. The ghost shrugged. Just thinking. Same as you. They both thought for a little while longer, before Midoriya turned away from the window completely. Well, that's enough thinking for now. Gami gave him a little shove, laughing under his breath. Your brain can only handle so much. What are you trying to say? Midoriya snorted, elbowing him back. The two devolved into playful bickering and light chatter, filling up the room with aimless conversation. Even now, after so many years, Midoriya still found it quite amazing how natural things between him and Gami felt. Words flowed like water on his tongue, sloshing naturally between tones like waves themselves. He hadn't had many good relationships for very long, but even then, he just had a feeling that what he shared with Gami was unique beyond that. Maybe one day he'd get there with Todoroki or Uraraka or Ida, but he knew something about this relationship would always be different, beyond the innate nature of things. Midoriya considered himself very lucky to know Gami for exactly who he was. Eventually, time passed as it always did, and his classmates began arriving for the day. Most were surprised to see him there. He hadn't realized so many people had expected him to stay home after yesterday's events. He spent most of his time consoling worried faces and frantic friends, and with every reassurance he gave, he felt a bit more reassured himself. With time, thankfully, things died down, and the classroom returned to its usual ambiance until the bell rang, and Aizawa walked in, not even a second after. The hero cleared his throat, settling down at the front of the room with a piece of paper in his hands. Given what happened, he didn't bother with pleasantries or small talk. UA is taking some extra precautions with these villains. No one needed an explanation of what he was referring to, but Midoriya still got some pointed looks that he couldn't help but to shy away from. Aizawa turned the sheet of paper sideways, holding it strangely in both hands. Thus, A sharper tear interrupted him. We've had to cancel our usual accommodations at the last minute. We won't reveal the destination of the camp until the day we depart. Two halves of a piece of paper floated to the floor, and the room erupted into chaos. What do you mean? Midoriya heard Sero yell in front of him. I already told my parents. That's precisely the point, Yaoyorozu nodded, turning to the rest of the class. The school can't control who learns what or how. There were some whiny agreements, and Midoriya continued to listen in on the cacophony silently. Honestly, he was surprised the trip wasn't canceled altogether. But for what it was worth, he was grateful. Maybe that was part of the reason Aizawa had left to talk with Nezu. But speculations aside, he couldn't deny that he was still glad they were going. He could use a little break from it all. Even if that supposed break was going to be more schooling and training. You. Bakugo's voice grumbled from just above the noise, subsequently quieting things down. You should have killed him. Midoriya froze, choking on his own breath, his heart stuttering in his chest. If you try to do anything, I'll kill you. And then, on my way out, I'll kill as many people as I pass. Gami placed a hand on his back, and suddenly Midoriya remembered how to breathe again, just as the words really sank in. God, Bakugo! Hagakure snapped around to face him, and despite being unable to see her face, her anger was clear. Didn't you hear how it was? Besides, using quirks in a public place is illegal anyway. More of his classmates chimed in to support him, but Midoriya didn't hear any of it. He turned his head to the side, opting to stare blankly at the wall as too many thoughts ran through his head. But when you wake up with 20, no, 30 bodies lying around you, you'll know it's all your fault. He pressed his eyes shut, trying to force out that disgustingly raspy whisper that brushed back through his ears. Just one little touch and they'd be on the floor, half their heads missing, brain matter oozing everywhere. Gami tried to ground him. Don't listen to him. And Sensei would love to finally meet you. There was a scarily large part of Midoriya that really wished he had. All right, all right. Aizawa didn't yell, but the sternness in his tone left no room for argument as the class quieted immediately. Everything else will still be as normal. We'll still leave at the end of the week, and you all still have classes until then. There was a collective groan, but no one bothered to fight him as Homeroom started to proceed as usual, his peers beginning to pull out their books for the rest of the day. Midoriya tried to reach for his, but his heart wasn't really in it anymore, as his eyes turned back to the window to stare out at the fluttering trees and perched birds and whatever could have been out there in the distance. Morning classes came and went as they usually did, but Midoriya used the monotony to recenter himself from earlier. It had taken more than a couple of breaths to put out those unwanted thoughts, but he found himself just feeling hungry, and nothing more by the time lunch rolled around. The sounds of scraping chairs and excited footsteps flooded the classroom as soon as the bell for lunch rang, and he couldn't deny being a part of it. He locked eyes with Uraraka's eager grin from afar as she pulled Ida and Asui with her, waiting for him to catch up by the door. Midoriya gathered the rest of his things from under his desk, stacking everything neatly into a pile he could hold, turning to Todoroki sitting beside him. "Are you joining us for lunch?" he asked playfully. Todoroki cocked his head slightly. "If you'll have me," he replied, polite as ever. Midoriya's grin faltered, but he laughed hesitantly to cover it up. "Of course, you're always welcome to sit with us, you know. I was just messing with you a little." With that, Todoroki flashed a small smile of his own, standing up from his seat. And who's to say I wasn't either? Midoriya heaved out an exasperated sigh. Oh, I can't believe you. He pushed his chair away with a rather harsh squeak, with a real laugh this time. He watched Todoroki start to leave him behind to join everyone else waiting by the door. And in a desperate effort to catch up, he tried to grab all his things in one quick swoop. Unfortunately, try was all he could do, as he inevitably dropped some things in his haste. Oh, come on, he cursed under his breath, complaining like it wasn't his fault in the first place. He scooped everything up between his arms and his chest, and carefully rose to his feet so as not to make the same mistake again. Izuku. Midoriya wobbled, but Gami was quick to hold his things to keep them from falling again. He stabilized before perking his head in a way that only Gami would really understand, though making sure to add a little disgruntlement only the ghost could see too. Apologies, he tacked on a little hastily. I was just wondering if you had a few minutes to spare before heading off to lunch. Midoriya waited, expecting Gami to say more, but when the air drifted off into silence instead, he couldn't help the confused glance he sent his way. That didn't even prompt the ghost, however, as Gami patiently waited on his successor's response. Midoriya set his things back onto his desk. Man, he just picked them up, too, before heading over to the group waiting expectantly on him. Midori, are you... Uraraka cut herself off, confusion spreading over her face. Where's your stuff? Why don't you guys go on without me? He suggested, sheepishly, as the rest of his friends turned to see what was going on. I'll catch up in a second, I promise. Unfortunately, his nonchalance didn't do much convincing for the others as Asui stepped out from behind Ida, a finger pressed on her cheek. Is this about what Bakugo said earlier? She asked pointedly. I'd try not to take what he says all too seriously. It's not like he knows what he's talking about. Uraraka softened at the supposed explanation. We're just glad you're all right. We hope you know that. Ida and Todoroki nodded in silent agreement, and the four stared down Midoriya expectantly, waiting for him to grab his things so they could get to lunch. Midoriya could only blink owlishly, wishing that things could only be that simple. Guys, really, I'm fine. It's not that at all. He waved his hands dismissively. I just need a moment to myself. It's nothing serious, I promise. He smiled, light and genuine, until he met Todoroki's eyes, and all the doubt came flooding back. Those heterochromatic eyes pierced right through him, straight to his soul, and Midoriya suddenly worried they would find some untruth he didn't even know was there. He wasn't lying, and yet he couldn't help but stand in silence like he'd been caught committing sin himself. And just as quickly, Todoroki softened, his eyes relaxing as he allowed himself to follow suit, having found nothing of what he was looking for. All right. Turning away, he waved the rest of the group to follow. He'll join us when he's ready. Awkwardly, though not without some hesitation, Ida, Uraraka, and Asui trailed behind. Don't take too long, Uraraka called back to him as she shut the door behind them. Midoriya stood like a statue, and only when he was sure he was alone did he let out a loud sigh of relief. God, that was way more stressful than it had to be. He muttered to himself, running a hand down his face. He turned back around to face Gami. So what did you want to... His words shriveled up on his lips, seeing Gami floating a few feet away from him, hesitantly fiddling with his hands. He couldn't see the ghost's face. He never had. But he could still find the uncertainty hiding in the depths of his shadows. The look was starting to become more and more normal for Gami, and Midoriya wasn't sure how to feel about it. He took a small step forward. "Hey, is everything all right?" Gami fidgeted. "I've just been thinking." "You don't think we've done enough of that for today?" Midoriya joked loosely, trying to keep the air light. His fragile smile fell when Gami didn't laugh back. "I was just wondering, when you look at me, do I have a soul? Is there something there?" In all the years Midoriya had known him, there had never been a time he'd ever seen Gami look so small. He wasn't sure how to respond. Caught so completely off guard, it was like he forgot to breathe entirely. "You... actually, I don't know," he answered truthfully as his mind caught up to his mouth. "I've never really paid attention if you do." He took another step forward, looking closer at the dark fog that composed most of his mentor's body, but that was all he could see. Gami had always looked like a shadow, save for the skeletal limbs that sometimes peeked out and his signature pendant draped around his neck. But even with his semi-solid form, Gami seemed just as opaque as anything else. The only thing that gave him away were the wispy threads of fog that always seemed to roll off his silhouette, like a single puff of air could scatter him into the wind. He dispersed that thought as quickly as it came, swallowing nervously. I mean, you have to have one. I can check." The offer didn't seem to stir anything in the ghost, but Gami turned away from Midoriya's eyes, like his successor would suddenly find something he wasn't ready to see. "It's just... there was something." He hesitated. "Something Kimura said that's been bothering me." Midoriya shifted instantly to shock. Wait, like just now?" he sputtered. No. Gami shook his head. "Yesterday, when I was... you know." He didn't bother elaborating, letting that thought drift away into a silence that came too eagerly. Worried, perpetually worried, like he always was, Midoriya drove away the quiet with his own unfiltered thoughts, like the quiet would suddenly spook Gami back into secrecy. "I mean, you've never looked like a typical soul. I don't know if that's how it works, though. It's not like I've seen anyone have a soul until..." He opted not to say that part out loud. "I don't know if being a ghost is different than being a soul. I don't know how any of this works." Midoriya looked up at Gami for answers, and this was one of many times Gami desperately wished he had answers to give. I'm still dead." He tried to logic. "So I should have one, right?" "I guess that makes sense, but I don't really see anything." Midoriya stared hard, trying to find anything noteworthy past his usual dark robe, lanky limbs, and hunched shadow. "Even I do not know the extent of my sins." It's just you." Midoriya didn't understand why Gami looked so disappointed at that. "Even with the rest of them." There had been countless times where Midoriya worked in Gami's presence, but for the life of him, he couldn't remember his mentor looking any different, for better or for worse. But he knew that wasn't going to be an answer that satisfied Gami in any meaningful way. So instead, he allowed the room to glow with the light of countless lives, falling naturally around them like stars. Still, Gami looked as dark as ever, like a black hole in the center of space. Some lonely souls brushed up to him, but Midoriya didn't have the heart to face them, not when Gami didn't look the same. "No, I'm sorry, I don't see anything." he admitted quietly, before his face scrunched up. What did Kimura tell you? That you have no soul? 'Cause I swear that's not... No. He did say we have a soul. It's ours. We're sharing it for now, I think. I despise the fact we are truly the same soul. Confused and exasperated, Midoriya ran a hand through his hair, pulling it taut. Then, what? Gami, I don't really understand. He told me that I refused to pass on. Midoriya loosened his grip. What? Gami curled in on himself, hugging his arms to his chest in a way that reminded Midoriya of how he used to hold his All Might figurines close when he slept at night as a child. I didn't really understand what he meant until I thought about it more. I guess all those years ago, I wanted nothing more than to stay with you. So I did. I want to stay. I stayed, and I never really thought about the fact that I was supposed to leave. You have been involved ever since you refused to pass on. You thought you could cheat the system as I tried. But if that's the truth, and Kimura is telling the truth, then isn't our soul far beyond 24 hours? Midoriya's hands dropped down to his sides, and he wasn't sure what to do with them as gravity pulled them down, 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 until there was nowhere lower to go. Oh my God. He pressed his palm to his forehead, suddenly feeling very faint. No, that can't be the case. It has to be different for you. He tried to justify. I mean, you're my mentor. You were meant to stick around for at least a little while. The same thing can't apply. But I'm dead. I have to have one. Kimura said we have one. I don't understand why I don't look like the rest of them. His last words came out like a wounded bark, and the classroom lights flickered for a moment. The souls surrounding them quickly scattered away, scampering like mice until Midoriya was positioned between them and Gami. The ghost looked up at the damage he caused, eyes darting between each floating orb accusingly, until he finally rested on Midoriya. He was shivering ever so slightly. Was it that cold in here? Gami looked down at his hands, still and lifeless as they'd always been, but almost completely masked by the smoke radiating off him in plumes. He felt faint and fragile, like just one wrong move could dismantle him completely. Was that him? Midoriya tried to get his mouth to move the way he wanted it to, but his teeth chattered too hard to let him. Unless it has something to do with the fact that it's beyond expiration. Gami continued to mutter lowly to himself, unaware of how hazy he was becoming, or of how fast the temperature in this spot of the room was dropping. Midoriya shivered from the cold, trying to ward out the chill from his very bones. He usually found comfort in Gami's undead chill, such a unique staple of his, but this was nothing like usual. There was nothing pleasant about the air freezing from inside his lungs. Gami! He lurched forward, grabbing his hands instinctively. Almost immediately he pulled away, the frigidness jumping from the ghost's bones to his own. He stuttered for a moment, unsure of what to do next, before deciding to grab the front of his robe instead. His fingers sank into the fog, and yet it was viscous enough for him to grip and shake. The ghost didn't seem to hear him, or feel his hands on his chest. No more thinking, Midoriya commanded. Stop thinking and just talk to me. Gami snapped back to reality. The first thing he felt was how badly Midoriya was shaking. Let go of me. He tried to pull away. I'm hurting you. You're not hurting me, Midoriya argued, refusing to let go of him, despite the tremors running up and down his spine. It's just cold. You're cold, so take a breath until you feel like you again. Realizing his successor really wasn't going to unhand him, Gami breathed in deeply, pressing his eyes shut to concentrate on feeling normal again. Despite how he tried, he couldn't find anything to touch to ground himself on. And since he refused to grab Midoriya's skin despite how alluring the warmth was, he focused instead on things that made him feel warm. The glow of the morning sun against the clouds. The sounds of soft waves crashing against the shore. The distant smell of tea and lavender from a memory that wasn't his own. Gami breathed and reminisced until he felt Midoriya's hands leave him, and only then did he bother to open his eyes. Once Midoriya felt the ghost starting to solidify again, he let go of his grip. The air in the room had started to warm up again, and Gami's outline returned to looking fixed. Still, he couldn't deny how exhausted he looked, and Midoriya wondered just how much power Gami truly kept hidden within him. "I didn't mean," he tried to say. "I know you didn't mean to, but you have to start talking to me," Midoriya stressed. "You can't keep bottling things up like this. It's not healthy for you, and it's not healthy for me either." Gami nodded slowly. "I apologize." "It's okay. It's always going to be okay." He reached for Gami's hand, now able to hold it comfortably in his own. "Now tell me what you were thinking about." My soul, if I have one, and Kimura says we do, then it would have to be long expired." "We established that as a possibility." Midoriya chose his response carefully. "Is that perhaps why I don't appear the same?" Gami glanced over to the other souls, still huddled far from the two of them. Midoriya glanced back too. "I mean, it's plausible. It's not like we've ever seen what happens to a soul after 24 hours. I've never let one get that far." What if that is the reason we've never seen another like me?" Gami whispered, afraid to hear his own admission aloud. "Because you've never allowed a soul to expire as I allowed myself." Midoriya's whole expression widened, suddenly recalling the conversation he had with All Might the night prior. He turned back again to the group of floating souls behind him and tentatively reached a hand out. The glittering light seemed to hesitate, until one drifted forward warily, nesting itself in Midoriya's palm. The boy pulled it back, holding it close between him and his mentor. "You definitely feel colder than this." Midoriya threaded his other hand back into Gami's robe, closing his eyes to really feel the two distinct sensations. "But otherwise, you do feel like a normal soul. You're both kind of foggy, but spongy too. It's almost like you're solid, but the longer I hold either of you, the more I'm not really sure." Midoriya opened his eyes, readjusting himself to the soft glow of the light in his hand, and the wispy darkness standing before him. "What does that mean? If I myself feel the same as a human soul, is my soul then not confined to that shape?" Gami stared down at his hands, running his skeletal fingers through his own foggy wisps of his robe. "Is my whole being my own soul?" It was a dizzying concept, and Midoriya struggled to wrap his own head around it, despite his evidence being the thing to prompt it. "I don't know." They stared between themselves and the small soul that floated between them, like they'd find the answers waiting for them if they stared hard enough. "But if we're right about everything else, why would expiration be bad? I mean, look at you." Midoriya gestured to Gami proudly. "You're cognitive and sentient. Isn't that a good thing?" Gami did not seem convinced. I do not exist without suffering." He leaned his head back, away from his successor's confused look. "Do you remember the conversation we had after the incident in Hosu?" "You're acting a lot like a poltergeist, Gami." "Oh, yeah." The memory flashed in his head. "We talked about you having an attachment to me. I remember." Gami allowed the thought to settle in Midoriya's head before continuing. "I fear my form is fundamentally unstable. It doesn't exactly feel right to interact with the world in the manner I do. Sometimes I find myself feeling muted, like parts of me are watery, empty, like I am missing." The ghost didn't realize how upset he was becoming until Midoriya's hands were suddenly in his own, and he felt whole again. "And then I'm with you, and I feel right. I feel stable." The big thing about poltergeists is that they're very emotional kinds of ghosts. Usually they form an attachment to something important, and just being around that attachment makes them feel stronger. "Your attachment," Midoriya realized. "You think it's part of what's keeping you together." "I speculate." Gami nodded in confirmation. "I don't believe souls are meant to exist here for a long time, at least not without expecting to wither. I'm lucky." He forced that awful word out. "Because without you, I do not think I would be cognitive at all, much less sound of mind." They processed the weight of the theory in silence, as the rest of the souls finally decided the air was warm enough to rejoin them. Fuck! Midoriya exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair again. "If that's the case, if we're really right about this, then expiration is a way bigger deal than we realized." Suddenly, all the little lights surrounding them started to make him feel sick. "Shouldn't we have been told?" Midoriya asked in a betrayed whisper. He left out by who. "I mean, we're talking about souls rotting here if we don't get to them within a day. If that's the reason behind the rule, don't I deserve to know that?" "Shit, I don't know how I haven't missed one yet, and that was without knowing how much is really at stake." He tried to keep his breathing even, but the sheer whirlwind of unknown swept him off his feet. What would happen if he messed up even once? Would it even be possible to recover a soul if it hit that point? Even just a second over? Or would they be forced to wander the world alone until they rotted away completely? Would they even get the peace of dying again? Or would they be forced to exist infinitely, as the unstable husk that Gami was teetering on? Midoriya collapsed under the weight of all his thoughts, sinking into Gami's arms. Do you think Kimura knew?" He entertained one last thought. "We are the same." "I don't know." Gami held him close, surrounded by a sea of stars he would never be able to reach. "You will know the truth whether you wish to or not." "I really don't know." If Midoriya and Gami had learned anything from dealing with the strange curse that afflicted him, it was not to overly worry about speculation. Gami had learned that lesson better than most, since the majority of what he did with his time was think. So it was him who calmed Midoriya that day and convinced him to go to lunch like he intended. It was him who brushed off the boy's attempts to bring it back up later that night and the following nights after. All they were doing was speculating, and all that was going to do was stress both of them out. The only people who knew the answers to all the questions they were thinking would never tell, and the rules would remain regardless. Gami always ended up thinking once Midoriya went to bed, it was all he had to do other than leave the boy completely, and something deep inside him really seemed to dislike that idea as of late. He wondered if that meant that Kimura did somewhat care about Midoriya, despite his insistence otherwise. But then again, he could never be sure of what Kimura was thinking. Every word with him seemed deceitful, a web of half-truths spun to keep him guessing, to keep him digging. Part of him wondered what Kimura wanted by implying the existence of his rotting soul. Part of him, aware of Kimura's underhanded nature, wondering if it would be the ultimate counter against him to never find out the truth at all. The ghost was never left thinking for long, thanks to Midoriya's mangled sleep schedule, and eventually other thoughts came to occupy their time instead, like where they were going to sit as they waited for the bus to take them to camp. Midoriya looked around. Both Class 1A and Class 1B waited together excitedly on the sidewalk for the charter bus to come. This had been a surprise to both classes, one that both Aizawa and 1B's teacher Vlad King had kept secret until this very morning. Midoriya didn't really know any of the students in the other hero class all that well, but it seemed like everyone was excited to get to know each other, and maybe having a little fun while doing it. His ears picked up on a little bickering off to the side that sounded eerily like Monama's voice. He reminded himself that mostly everyone was excited to hang out together. Gami, likely being a little bored himself, moved out from behind him to poke at his rolling suitcase. "How far do you think I could move this before someone were to notice?" Midoriya yanked the handle, jerking the suitcase back to his side. "You're insufferable." The ghost heard the smile in his whisper, however, and draped himself across the top of the suitcase instead. "You know, this is pretty fun. If you wanted, I could push you." "Never mind." He made a pointed effort to look him in the eye. "What a shame." "That's not going to convince me to let you roll the suitcase." Midoriya sighed lowly with a hand on his head, glancing around just to make sure no one was close enough to hear. "Sometimes I forget you're 500 and not 5. And get off before you manage to break it somehow. Yamada was nice enough to let me use it for the trip. I don't want to give it back broken." "I would not," he pouted, but moved off the suitcase nonetheless. He turned his back to Midoriya, grumbling under his breath. "I have dense bones, thank you." "Drama queen," Midoriya muttered back with a smile. He glanced around again for the bus while Gami sulked, almost like he'd somehow be able to spot it before anyone else. Mostly, everyone was grouped up and chatting, and without Gami talking, his heartbeat suddenly felt a little too loud in his chest. He spotted Ida, Uraraka, and Asui standing together, and started to make his way towards them, before spotting Todoroki, standing off to the side by himself. He slowed, before making up his mind. Damn, he should have brought that figurine he bought at Kiyoshi Ward to gift to him. Oh well, he'd just have to gift it to Todoroki after they got back from the camp. "Hey, Shoto!" Midoriya gave a small wave, trailing to a stop beside him. He waited for Todoroki to process his presence, continuing once he saw a small smile in return. "Are you excited for camp? What do you think it's going to be like?" Todoroki pondered. "I'm not sure, though I'm curious to see where it'll be taking place now compared to before." He looked off at the empty parking lot again. "I've been looking forward to the trip, actually. I don't usually get to go off places on my own." "I kind of get that." Midoriya nodded. "I've never been out of the area, so I'm hoping we'll be in some part of Japan I've never seen before." "That would be nice," Todoroki drawled, his eyes staring out to the sky, as he considered the thought. Midoriya looked up too, focused on the cotton clouds in the sky, watching the way they wistfully drifted across, weaving behind the school buildings around them. Maybe it was the sun in his eyes, but the sight pulled something hazy from him, like that promise of a distant dream he hopelessly wished for each night. As a hero student, this might be bad to admit. Todoroki started again, still gazing up. But I hope we get to relax at least a bit. Midoriya turned back to him in surprise. "Why would that be a bad thing?" He sighed. "I just think we're expected to do a lot. I think, with everything that's happened, it's easy to forget we just got to high school. Suddenly, Midoriya didn't think he was just talking about the class anymore. Yeah, his mind flashed between old memories, meeting All Might under the bridge, destroying the zero-pointer during his exam, the USJ invasion, the sports festival, Hosu. It really has been only a few months. The thought drifted off into silence between the two of them. Something different for each. Attention! Ida's voice cut through the air. The buses have arrived. Please organize yourself by class. Midoriya bounced excitedly, almost disappointed that he missed catching it, but too impatient to care. It's finally here. Oh, I'm so excited. He pumped his fists. Todoroki didn't match his enthusiasm so outwardly. But Midoriya still heard him chuckle. Would you want to sit together? Oh, sure. Midoriya lit up, dragging his suitcase towards the Class 1A bus. He turned back over his shoulder. Do you want the window? Hey, wait. Todoroki called after him, but Midoriya had already gone too far to hear. He couldn't help but laugh for real this time, lugging his bag faster than it could roll. Gami, off sulking to himself still, finally returned to reality at the commotion. What? He glanced around, finding himself alone and Midoriya running off without him. Seriously? You traitor! I can't believe you! Class 1A left their luggage outside the bus for the UA staff to load as they piled inside. Despite getting there first, Midoriya waited for Todoroki to board first before following on. The seat selection was already looking slim, but Uraraka and Asui, sitting behind Ida and Yaoyorozu, waved them down to a set of 2 empty seats across from them. Todoroki shuffled in, settling himself by the window, and Midoriya followed suit. He ducked down to slide his backpack under the seat in front of him, and when he popped back up, he was met with Gami's shadowed face next to his. He jumped unconsciously, unable to suppress the tiny gasp that escaped him. Todoroki looked over to him. Are you all right? Midoriya resisted the urge to side-eye the ghost next to him. Yeah. He laughed awkwardly, patting his hair. Just hit my head. Serves you right. Gami pouted like nearly outing him wasn't a big deal. Didn't even save me a seat. Midoriya pointedly ignored him, though he couldn't deny the small pang in his heartstrings regardless. There wasn't really a good way to apologize even if he wanted to, however. At least not until they got somewhere more private. So instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone and a pair of corded earbuds that Yamada had lent him, along with the suitcase. He held them out to Todoroki in offering. Do you want to share? I have a feeling it's going to get pretty loud in here. The other smirked. Just as long as we can switch back and forth. Gami crossed his arms in disbelief. Fine. Guess I'll just stay right here then. And Gami did, even as Aizawa announced their departure, even as the class cheered, even as the bus took off. He floated silently in the aisle next to his successor, and without another place to dispense his thoughts, they collected noisily in his head, drowning out the cacophony of the kids around him. He looked over to the side, watching Midoriya bob his head happily, Todoroki sitting peacefully next to him. A strange feeling settling in his stomach. Maybe he took things a little too far. He was only joking at the beginning, but maybe, somewhere along the way, his feelings really did get hurt. He held nothing against Todoroki, none of Midoriya's friends. They were the best things to ever happen to the boy. Maybe this time, things were on him. I'm sorry if I took things a bit too far. Gami spoke aloud, the sound of his own voice suddenly the loudest thing he could possibly hear. I really was only being facetious. He laughed to himself, now only hearing the half-baked lie woven into his words. He missed how Midoriya glanced at him through the corner of his eye. I think it's a wonderful thing that you finally have so many people in your life that care for you that... Gami choked up, stumbling over himself. That really love you. The ghost looked around, spotting Uraraka and Asui huddling together, spotting Ida and Yaoyorozu trying to control the chaos, spotting Aizawa, subtly smiling at his students, spotting Todoroki, closing his eyes and resting his head back, like he'd finally found complete safety. And I'm so, so thankful, because that's all I ever wanted for you. That is all you've ever deserved. Gami reached up, fumbling with his stone pendant. He didn't feel anything from it, and yet a deep sadness rang from his memories, nearly toppling him over. I love you so much, Yoko. I am so lucky to have you in my life. He could almost hear Kimura's tears, hundreds of years old, yet startlingly familiar. I guess maybe there is a part of me a bit fearful. His chest felt strange, a tight rattling lodged behind his ribs. That you may not need me anymore. His mouth tasted like selfishness, and for the first time it didn't taste like Kimura's. He wasn't jealous of Todoroki, or of anyone that Midoriya had chosen to let into his life. You have been involved ever since you refused to pass on. You thought you could cheat the system as I tried. He just hoped there was still a place left for him in it. Gami wasn't expecting a response, but he couldn't help but fill the silence with his own thoughts anyway, if only to keep him from thinking new ones. I'm sorry. That's a selfish thing to say. I should not have tried to make it about myself. He stopped in his tracks, his eyes drifting down to the silent movement beside him. Midoriya still gazed blankly at the seat in front of him, but his arm had moved from its comfortable place on his lap to the armrest next to the aisle, and slowly, with a deliberate, unassuming laze, his hand rotated until his palm faced upwards. Gami blinked, unsure if any of that was intentional, even less certain on whether he should ask. Perhaps he was overthinking things again. Perhaps Midoriya hadn't meant anything by it at all. Midoriya's fingers wiggled slowly in repetition. Gami swore. It looked almost like a beckon. Midoriya's eyes flickered toward the aisle for just a second. Gami swore he almost looked right at him. Midoriya's face relaxed into a gentle smile. Gami swore it couldn't possibly be for him. And yet, despite all his better judgment, Gami was selfish. His heart craved with such an ache he almost tricked himself into believing there was something more inside his chest other than fog. He reached for things he wasn't sure he deserved. He reached for Midoriya's hand, intertwining their fingers together. And just for a moment, just from his warmth alone, Gami felt so incredibly whole. Midoriya's fingers squeezed his own. Gami snapped down in shock. Midoriya's eyes settled on him. Gami felt them pierce right through him. Midoriya's face relaxed into a gentle smile. Gami swore it couldn't possibly be for him. And yet, despite all his better judgment, Gami was selfish. Gami sobbed so hard in the middle of the aisle, drowning out the cacophony of everything around them. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 52 of Deku and Death. The second half to this chapter will be up next. It's a pretty lengthy one, and I thought this was such a good stopping point because I really love the emotions coming from Gami here. A lot of great development taking place, and we also see Midoriya and Todoroki's friendship evolving too. So a lot of really great growth that takes place throughout this one. Some new theories between them as well, and leading up to the camp right? The summer training camp. And so I'm really curious to see maybe what your thoughts are, how you're feeling about the fic as we've picked it back up again. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.